Friends, DeFi is having a moment. Uniswap Labs web app and wallet connect you to the excitement. Swapping and bridging are simple, low cost, and lightning fast across 13 chains, including Base, Arbitrum, and Unichain, the new layer 2 network designed for DeFi. Thanks to deep liquidity on Uniswap protocols, you get minimal price impact on every trade, now with even greater efficiency through Uniswap v4. Swap, send, on ramp, off ramp, and bridge into a bright future. Get started at uniswap.org.
Avery, it's a momentous and yet poignant day. We're going to talk about why in a second. But before we do, I just want to know what's going on in your world. Where are you at the moment? And how are you feeling?
Hi, Sam. It is so nice to see you. Your hair looks amazing today.
Thank
I'm
you.
sitting in my office in Miami, and it's a beautiful day in March. How's everything in your world?
Good. Both myself and Wen, our producer, we just got back from a whirlwind trip to Asia for Consensus Hong Kong.
Heard it was incredible.
Yeah, it went really, really well. And then we independently both were going to Japan. So we did a little karaoke, had some shabu shabu. We did the things we needed to do in Japan as well. And now back and getting ready for the rest of the year. It's a crazy time in this game of crypto, you know?
It sure is. It is. There's never a dull moment in crypto, but the last couple of weeks have been, our favorite ride at the amusement park, aka the roller coaster.
Yes, absolutely. But before we get into the craziness, I think it's important to talk about the changing nature of the show. Sadly, so sadly, in fact, for me, this will be our last scheduled show with Avery as our
Yes, ma'am.
co-host. After almost 2.5 years, 110 or 12 episodes so far. And maybe, Avery, you can talk a little bit why it's time for you to focus on some other things.
Yes. Well, for one, Sam, huge thank you for being the most incredible co-host. When we first kicked off the Gen Z podcast, it was right in the middle, right in the thick of, this incredible time in the world of NFTs and digital collectibles and Web3 opening up whole new possibilities for brands and businesses and financial models. And at that time, I was the president of Vayner3, which is continues to be our innovation agency, and was 100% focused on how brands can leverage the opportunities that were emerging in Web3. And what I think we've seen over the last 2.5 years is the opportunities within the crypto and Web3 space are abundant, but at least for VaynerMedia clients, they have become less of a priority than they once were. I think this ties into exactly what we're talking about right now with the regulatory environment, the roller coaster that we've been on for the last couple of years. Being what it is, I think a lot of our more enterprise partners who are not in the financial services sector, but not necessarily a core part of our business. And Gary reassigned my role to be focused as our chief marketing officer at Vayner, really helping our brand friends do everything from strategy, creative media production, and build our brand as Vayner. So I've gotten a little further away from it than I once was, though you know me, I continue to have a very deep passion for this space and a very deep passion for the Gen Z podcast. And when I think about the 112 incredible guests we've had on the show, it has just been like the who's who, from the CMOs of Coinbase to the heads of marketing of Meta's Reality Labs to, diving in with the Roblox team to Kraken to just not only the brand folks, but the business leaders and the creators and the entrepreneurs building this space. It's been such an incredible ride. I feel like we could and should write a book on what we learned on Gen Z.
I agree on that. It's honestly about time. We both are busy people. So until AI is ready to do a little bit more of the work than we can get from it today, we will have to continue to discuss that. But, first off, I just want to say thank you to you for what an amazing run we've had together. We met prior to our podcast. I think it was maybe a year into our relationship that we decided to launch it. It's been an amazing back and forth dialogue for going on 2.5 years now. And I've always appreciated deeply your contribution and your insights and your brilliance and your strategic mind and your, all of the things that you do, both individually, but also I think, Vayner has been doing some amazing work in general in the innovation space.
Sam.
Yeah. So it just makes me feel honored to be able to have this time with you. And I think we should recognize the changing nature of this industry. I think you're spot on that a lot of the clients that were super bullish in 21 and 22 and we're jumping in, we're doing so probably early and not recognizing that the industry wasn't necessarily going to go where they were going in it. And I think that there was a there was a sort of like, let's throw everything we can for a press release, and oh, this stuff is actually hard, and oh, this stuff is actually complicated, and oh, this stuff is also really messy, and maybe it's just too early. I don't think a lot of those brands won't be considering digital asset strategies for the future. I think they're all going to be, and hopefully working with you and teams like yourselves. But I think that the nature has changed. I think it's interesting that today, as we were recording this, final episode with you and I, Gen C will continue. But as we're recording this, there's a summit happening as we speak in Washington with many of the biggest leaders of crypto exchanges and blockchains
Financial leaders.
and financial leaders, with the president, with his appointed crypto czar, David Sachs, and a bunch of other folks. I don't think this would have happened a year ago. So I also think, we are still, not to use the phrase, we are still early, but we are so early in this that it's probably sort of more strategic for a brand to say, let's wait and see how this plays out. And maybe it starts with, we'll just take crypto. Maybe it ends up being something very, very different. But, I guess I wondered, if you had any thoughts on kind of where we are today compared to where we were 6 months ago in the space, and maybe what brands should be paying attention to.
Absolutely. Brands are going to be thinking about their digital asset strategies in the future without question. And it is timely that this is happening in Washington right now. Obviously, the Trump administration has brought a completely different perspective to what we've been seeing. I wouldn't necessarily say that's a more stable perspective, but that's a different perspective to what we've been feeling the last couple of years from the Biden administration. I think you're putting it in a perfect way, that this is not going away. In fact, it's just getting bigger and it's getting more established in other places in the world. Like you just mentioned, being in Hong Kong, they are adopting a lot of these type of thing really quickly, more quickly than what we're seeing in the Western world. I also think when I reflect back, it was a little bit of this COVID hangover that created this, unique system in this unique moment in time, because people had been cooped up. They were, really focusing on their digital selves in a big way, really viewing themselves as a digital first ecosystem in a way that they probably didn't before COVID. And as more normal life kind of resumed, some of that fell off a little bit. These digital first communities became less important. Now we are also seeing this sort of consumer drive to meet in person, to bring back IRL experiences. And I think these two things are going to exist in harmony. We were probably just got a little ahead of our skis on that. And also the investment that went behind this from brands was really significant, again, due to sort of a unique moment in time, a unique moment in economic stimulus where, let's test a couple $1,000,000 on this and see how it goes, was, a little bit more freewheeling than I think it is right now. And that's something that wasn't unique just to brands, but was consumers as well. Consumers were just spending on things in this sort of post-COVID revenge travel vibe. So there was a unique moment in time that I'm very grateful for, because I think it catalyzed a lot of really interesting things and a lot of really interesting people, and opened those opportunities for them. I think back to our first guest who had recently launched a Web3 consumer fund, and she's now doing really cool stuff in the world of sports, right? Like the world doesn't stop. The world doesn't, stay in one place. It is constantly evolving. And I actually think a lot of the sort of NFT, Web3, crypto communities have gone on to do other really cool and really interesting things that bring a lot of these principles of decentralization into more mainstream avenues as well. So all this to say, it has been such an incredible ride. And I think back to sort of what created that unique moment in time. And I honestly would change very little. I think back to the projects that we launched with our brand friends and on behalf of Vayner, and I'm proud of all of them. I think they were all the right thing to do at the time. Of course, we can always be better. We can always learn things, but even from the evolution of VFriends from 2021 through now, VFriends is a completely different business. Now it's more of a collectibles business, a cards business. There's some really cool stuff that we're doing on a daily basis on Fanatics Live and whatnot. And I think, that's a perfect illustration of perfectly capitalizing on a unique moment in time to build a digital first community that can transform into a whole other business. And I'm grateful to everyone who joined this podcast when I was a host with you, because I learned a lot from them, and I'm certainly not going anymore. What are your lessons, Sam, in the last 2.5 years of Gen C?
Before we get to our lessons, and I think we should talk about that, but, I think something that's sparked by what you said, you mentioned Max Kala, who was our first guest, and as well as some others who have we got in and had conversations around Web3 specifically, and then we have noticed maybe they've followed different trajectories. I also think about people like Keith Grossman, who was president of Time and is now president of Enterprise at MoonPay. Think about Mayur Gupta, who we had on a couple of weeks ago from Kraken, who before that was Spotify. I interviewed in Hong Kong Christina Smedley, who's at Lightspark. Before that, it was Amazon and PayPal. So there's a lot of also traditional tech, like Web 2 tech folks who I think are seeing in a really interesting way that they have a place to play in this new sort of overarching idea of what consumer technology is going to be through the lens of digital assets, digital identity, AI, decentralized AI. And so on the one hand, we have a lot of people who are really passionate about it and who are seeing this as being the future. If you imagine someone like Keith, who, we both know well, someone saying, hey, you're leaving this prestigious position where you have access to almost anybody as the president of Time Magazine, and you're going to this payments focused Web3 brand. But then fast forward to yesterday, where his CEO, Ivan Soto Wright, is in the room in Washington with the head of Tether and some other amazing folks in crypto, with the CFTC, Caroline Pham, having discussions about how government can address digital money. And I think there's something really fascinating about that arc. So yes, we've seen people go away. I think we've seen what we probably should have expected in hindsight, right? Payments continues to be something interesting, investing.
That's why I said in the financial
Yeah.
services space, our clients are more invested than ever. Like, it's
Exactly.
matured so much, but it's less consumer first and more back end, I think.
Well, we still have the challenges of, the Trump token, right? Which, yes, brought 1 million new people in, but most of those people actually lost money unless they, got in yesterday. And, or we look at some of the folks who were so bullish on NFT art. And while we're still seeing giant successes, we recently had Sam Spratt on, who has made millions in his last drop and is so conscious about how he's growing his community. But, he's one of 15 successful artists today instead of 500 or 5,000. So I do think it is a very different place for us to be looking at. When we were in Hong Kong, I was speaking to one of our favorite people, Ian Rogers from Ledger. And the thing he said, which I thought was really fascinating, was, and in a very Ian way, he says, look, there is no doubt that we are heading into an agentic AI future where our agents are going to be doing things on our behalf. Now, the question is...
Of course, Ian is about the agentic AI.
Of course. But in very Ian fashion, are you going to give your bank accounts over to digital AI to make financial decisions on your behalf? Or do you need to be the layer that, says yes or no to this suggestion? And he's like, they're not going to be paying in cash. They're not going to be paying in credit. They're going to be paying in a digital asset that's transferable in seconds. And I think he was spot on. It's the idea that there's an inevitability of digital money happening at the speed of light. And the idea that these people pioneering it today, who we both know and follow and are interested in, are also paving the roads for the brands to come in the future, which I think is going to be a pretty fascinating thing to watch. I also want to ask, I was at a lunch yesterday and I ran into some of our other guests of the past, Nelly from LVMH, someone we both know, Alex from Ralph Lauren. And one of the things we were talking about was, everyone's sort of taking a little bit of a backseat right now on Web3. But, they're still talking about immersive gaming. They're still talking about Gen AI. They're still talking about digital assets as a category. And even Walmart yesterday launched physical and digital new collections, I think, in spatial and some of the other platforms. So we also did a great job together at covering some of these other sectors of emerging tech. So I guess when you look at the changing nature of the kind of Web3 blockchain side, I'm wondering also how you feel about the last 2.5 years and the changing nature of gaming and AI.
Yeah. And by the way, we at one point, TBD if this was successful or not, but we had our own definition of Web3 at Vayner as, the immersive, personalized, and ownable future of the internet, which I do agree with. And that is the view that we've always tried to take. A lot, in just being transparent for our listeners, a lot of our scopes of work that were focused on crypto and blockchain and NFTs evolved into being focused on AI. Agentic workflows now are all the rage. The reality is it's still very early days for how brands are using AI. And of course, there are certain tasks that we're automating. There are certain creative processes that we're making more efficient or more effective. But it's far from being like something that everyone is able to just turn on. So that remains a huge focus for us. Gaming is also massive. There's so many different dimensions to gaming, from like esports to Roblox to Fortnite. Each of them have their own culture. And what we've learned is that like, you really need to be in the particular games and environments to know the top creators, because it doesn't transfer as well as one might think, because they are truly like it'd be like, no, football and basketball, it's both the ball, right? Like, no, it's not. They are actually very different and unique, and you need custom strategies in order to be a brand who really breaks through. Um, but yeah, we've covered a lot of like these different dimensions, from AR to metaverse. Remember when metaverse was a huge thing, Sam? Now no one speaks about metaverse anymore. And when the Quest was like, people were spending zillions of dollars to build these experiences in Quest, and like 4 people would go. I think the common sense practicality always prevails. And that is true in any format of emerging tech. Yes, brands might do a pilot, but if they're going to sustainably invest in a channel, it needs to actually perform and drive business results and drive engagement. So I think all of the innovation will never die in marketing. We always like to say 10%, like, let us try something new, and 90% we know this is going to work. The reality is some brands are set up like that, some brands are not, but there will always be something new and next. If I think right now, what's like very top of my mind is honestly live commerce. That if I were a brand, that might be where I'm putting my 10% right now, is trying to figure that out, how you can really lean into it. And depending on what type of a vertical you're in, like, how can you do something that's authentic and cool and buzzy. But yeah, we covered a lot of ground from a lot of brands, from fashion to CPG to retail, and hearing all of their perspectives. I think there were common threads, but there were also people who were doing things in unique ways. And you're exactly right that many folks who were leading various parts of like NFTs or Web3 have gone on to double down on that, actually, to be like, hey, this is like the future of what I really believe in, and launch, whether that's launching companies. Luke is a great example, who was at, the Golden State Warriors, and now is full-time community building. And also big kudos to the folks who have been able to pivot what they originally started into a different direction. It's a very interesting world, and one that I think will just keep evolving. And I think we're going to come back to this in like 10 years, almost the way that like those early adopters were in social media, where they all like knew each other for a bit. We were just talking about South by Southwest, and all those like Twitter people used to like go to South by Southwest and meet up. That was almost like how it was with the Web3 community. And, then 10 years passes and everyone uses Twitter, and 10 years passes, everyone's going to be using various formats of Web3 enabled tech, but we'll meet up and speak about the old days when, people used to get hacked all the time.
So I want to ask you, just because again, we've always been very forward looking on the show. You mentioned live commerce. That's a big area you guys are looking at, or you yourself are looking at. Are there any other things that the brands of the future should be paying attention to? Or is there other, what's on the edges right now that is catching your attention?
Live commerce is one that I'm really leaned into. I mean, we've been doing stuff with AI for like since Midjourney first came out, so we're pretty far along in that. We're deeply partnered with the folks at Google on some Gemini stuff, and a couple of other different models on client specific engagements. But live commerce is one that has my eye. And then the second piece that honestly has driven like the refocus into social media for Vayner is the idea of creating organic content on social platforms that goes viral. That is something that for 10 years, it just didn't happen. It was like, you just had to put money behind it with paid. And this as a consumer, like now, if you're a brand and you make something funny or you make something interesting, it actually can go viral without money behind it. And that's a unique moment in time that won't last forever. So that's something that we're really doubling down on right now, that a shocking number of brand leaders still don't really get.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I've been reverse engineering a lot of the crypto media ecosystem around social over the last couple of weeks, because blockchain, and I've said this before, I think most marketers, not all, right? We've had some of the best on, but many of them in the space are still about 5 years behind traditional brands, I would say, in how they think about sophisticated marketing tactics. They're really focused on price going up and community chatter. I think you're right that they're missing the opportunity, which is that just core virality, core social presence can lead to amazing things. Pudgy Penguins is probably the best example, only in the sense of you cannot search a keyword and not find some penguin GIF that is there, right? Whether or not that makes them a success, we don't know. But the fact is,
I think unquestionably, like, they've been very successful. Like, they have toys at Walmart now. This was like born in the digital collectible revolution, and they have done an incredible job, not just of making money, but of making an engaged and sustained community.
Absolutely. Okay, Avery. So based on what you were saying earlier, yeah, let's do a couple quick takeaways
Yep.
This is not to say, by the way, that you're going to be completely off the hook, because we are certainly going to call you to come back in from time to time if you're up
Please,
for it.
please.
But when we look back at 2.5 years, over 100 guests, what do you take away? What are three things that you really felt that last with you from the experience of talking to all of these amazing business leaders?
I think my three key takeaways are: one, the world wants to experiment. I think what we heard on 112 episodes is very senior business executives from some of the largest and most successful companies in the world were investing real money and real time and real effort and energy to experiment with the next era of the internet. I think the second piece of it is it's still very early in terms of how successful those pilots or those programs were. So while there was desire to experiment and to innovate, and there is real desire there, the results are a total mixed bag. Some incredibly successful, some this was okay, some what did we just waste $1 million on? I think that's another kind of key takeaway. And the third thing is, what innovation means is constantly evolving. It's not just one format of technology. Whether it's esports or it's gaming or it's crypto or it's NFTs or it's AR. There are so many different vehicles that brands can consider as a way to be at the forefront of the next era of the internet, that it's not a one size fits all. And I've seen, the brands who try to copy paste what they're seeing, those are the ones who never break through and do anything cool. The brands who push it a little bit more, and it might even be like a Nike, like making a big acquisition with great risk, comes the potential for greatness, but it also comes with the potential to waste a lot of money. So I think that risk factor is a big sort of feed into to takeaway too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example, because whether we had someone like Pepsi or Anheuser-Busch or Nike, or Adidas on, they've all spent a lot of time looking at these technologies as a way to really just communicate better and connect better with their customer base. And the
And
jury's
by the
still
way, they all
yeah,
came to the consensus that Web3 had the potential to do so. These are
correct. Oh, correct.
not smart people. These are people who have their MBAs or business executives. They heard the pitch and they're like, yes, I want to do that. So like, there is consensus that this has tremendous potential.
Yeah, and I still think that's the point, right?
I
And that
agree.
that is, I think, the real thing. I spent a lot of time this week. I'm just gonna go a little rambly here, but I spent a lot of time this week on this concept of seismic shifts create revolutions, and those are very messy. And then out of it
Mhm.
comes new orders, but the new orders never look like what we thought, right? And whether it was the Gutenberg press, or it was radio and television, or it was the internet, and now it's AI. These are things that are pushing our cultures in ways that are unexpected, uncomfortable, and have a lot of friction. And out of that friction comes opportunity. I think that there is something specific about blockchain that also really aligns very well with the ethos of these revolutionary technologies, which is really about tearing down institutional gatekeepers
Right.
and trying to rebuild new ones. And so, that, which is very much the revolutionary ideas behind Bitcoin and some of the early blockchain folks. So I could also imagine on the flip side, right? We're Todd Kaplan over at when he was at Pepsi at the time, saying, "Hey, I really am interested in trying this thing, but I'm not sure if I want to get rid of money, right, in the way that we know it, because that's how people pay for our product in stores, right?" And so I could see that there probably is a tension within that is worth the exploration, but also is, and as we saw very much so, not any one of these are going to go full in. We all wanted Nike to put their entire collection on chain. They decided that was not the way they wanted to go. Why? Because they have a lot of folks who are customers who may not feel like they want to be in the blockchain industry, right? So I do think there is something about that is just something that I continually think about. And again, I think AI is the exact same as this. These are new forms of engagement with each other and with technology that are uncomfortable, that are messy, that are waiting for us to sort of find a stasis, but we may
Yep.
be years away from that stasis. So this period of discomfort is actually a lot of fun, but it's
Mhm.
also sort of changes how you have to think about things in ways that are uncomfortable. And as a marketer, we like the idea of like predicting your successes.
Of course we do. And by the way, I'll go back to this point that I think a lot of those brands, like Nike's an extreme example, right? 'Cause they made such a big investment. But if you think about a lot of the brands you mentioned, whether that's LVMH or Ralph Lauren, like they played and I think they won. Like they did something that, delighted their consumers. They experimented with a new technology. They got to get hands on with something that then they can assess, is this something I really want to scale into? Or should I, take this strategy and bring it more into a mass game that doesn't have blockchain as a core component?
Well, Avery, thank you so much for again everything you've contributed to me personally, to the show, to our audience, to our guests. You've brought so much to this. We are definitely going to be pinging you to come stop by every once in a while and tell us what's going on and give us your hot takes on sort of the changing nature of technology today. We wish you the best, obviously, in all of the things you're working on. And I just want to say it's been a fantastic 2.5 years, and I look forward to our continued personal relationship after.
Sam, thank you so much. Gen Z community, thank you so much. Many of you have come up to me in different settings and situations and sent LinkedIn messages and comments. This has been so much fun. I will definitely do another podcast, probably with Sam at some point, probably more around, modern marketing or something a little bit broader. But this has been an absolute joy, and huge thank you to all of our guests. And of course, I'm going to be a dedicated listener. Are you going to give a little sneak peek onto who's taking over as your co-host?
Um, No, but
Still
thank you.
interviewing candidates.
No, actually, we're going to take a couple weeks off after this episode, and we're going to come back with actually a slightly new format, which is not going to be a co-hosted format. It's going to be more direct, one-to-one conversations, and so less news of the week, which I think you and I did really well. It was a great back and forth. But I'm very interested in who are the sort of people who are both building in this technology and who are creating the brands of tomorrow in this technology. And that's really where I'm going to be bringing this show in the next bunch of months, because I think again, it just goes with what I was talking about earlier with this idea of disruption. We are still going to see some amazing brands come out of this world of decentralized AI, of blockchain, of Web3
Absolutely.
gaming. And, my hope is that we get to see some of those early folks as they're building instead of when they're just running the world.
Amazing. Sam, thank you for everything, Gen Z community. Thank you for everything, too. I can't wait to stay on as a listener, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Want market moving insights at your fingertips? Download the CoinDesk app for news, prices, videos, and events on the go.